Welcome. Thank you all so much for being here this afternoon here at the Portland Art Museum for Luzene Hill's artist talk and gallery talk today. I'm Mike Morawski, Director of Education. I have a lot of familiar faces in the audience, so it's good, but if there are new faces, I'm Mike Morawski. I'm Director of Education here at the Portland Art Museum. And I've been just so proud and honored to be a part of the Center for Contemporary Native Art, which is a project that, gosh, a year and a half ago we opened this, but it's probably been almost 4 years in the making of sort of getting the center sort of conceptualized and thought of. And I'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll introduce Luzene, and we'll get it kicked off. But before, just want to recognize and honor the indigenous peoples on whose ancestral lands this museum stands. That's so important for us to recognize, and as we go about our lives and work here too. So the Center for Contemporary Native Art has been a space where we, and the sort of the core vision of the space came from Dina Dark, who was our former curator of Native American art. So it was so amazing to work with her on conceptualizing this space, which used to be the Discovery Center here at the museum. So it's a family engagement space. We're trying to think about, it's so close to the Native American galleries out here, what are some opportunities for this space in terms of really exhibiting some work that we didn't have other spaces for. So we worked with a whole group of Native artists and advisors, and we're able to open the space in October of 2015. This is our 4th exhibition in the space, Connecting Lines, and I'm thrilled that we have both the artists with us, Luzene and Brenda Mallory, whose work is unfortunately in the backdrop today,
so it's okay.
But it's amazing. So I'm sure many of you have been in this gallery space since the exhibition opened, but if not, definitely come or stay. We'll clean up the stools and make sure you can really experience Brenda's work as well as Luzene's work. Quick intro for Luzene. Luzene is a multimedia artist, really well known for installations that address issues of violence against Native women. Her work reflects interdisciplinary scholarship in visual art, women's studies, Native American culture, and through work informed by pre-contact culture, she advocates for indigenous sovereignty. These concepts of linguistic, cultural, and personal sovereignty form the basis of her installations, her performance work, drawings, artists' books. As an enrolled member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, Luzene lives and works in Atlanta, Georgia, and her recent awards include the 2015 First Peoples Fund Fellowship, the 2015 Idle Museum Fellowship, where she met Brenda, and they sort of were able to initially connect, so we're thankful for that, and the 2016 Native Arts and Cultures Foundation Fellowship in Visual Arts, which brings Luzene to town, so enormous thanks to the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation for really partnering with us on the center and many of our programs we've had to highlight these artists and utilize this center and bring people together in it. It has been an incredible honor and pleasure to be working with Luzene on this exhibition, and this program is great to have you back in town this weekend, and I'll turn it over to Luzene Hill. Please join me in welcoming her.
Shio, Luzene Otalui. Hello, my name is Luzene Hill. As Mike said, I'm Eastern Band Cherokee, and my father was full blood. My family comes from the Yellow Hill community on the Qualla boundary, and we are of the Bird Clan. Before I start talking about the work, I'd like to say something about the syllabary, the Cherokee Syllabary, which our titles are in that, repeated in the syllabary. I don't know if you know that Sequoyah created a written language for the Cherokee people in the around 1821. He's one of the few people in history of the world who ever created a written language, just one person. He was illiterate in English, but he was a silversmith and an intellectual. The Cherokee people at that time, in the early 19th century, were living in North Georgia, centered in North Georgia and North Carolina and Tennessee. They tried to assimilate into the the white culture primarily to survive, I think. And so Sequoia observed that the settlers had talking leaves, which is what he called paper and letters and print, and that was something that was gave them power to be able to communicate that way. So he developed a syllabary. It's not an alphabet; it's a syllabary. Each of the symbols represents a syllable, and it so reflects the language so wonderfully well that within about a year, about 90% of the Cherokee people were literate after he. Yes, and at that point, people in the United States were probably about 40% literate in English. So it just fit very well because he was brilliant. And they, within about 8 years, after that got disseminated out and people were, reading and writing, a newspaper, a bilingual newspaper called the Cherokee Phoenix, was started being printed in New Echota, which is in North Georgia, and that was the capital of the Cherokee Nation at that point. It was published for 7 years, and then in 1835, the Cherokee removal began to happen. The press was destroyed by the Georgia militia, and many of the Cherokee people were walked to Oklahoma in the Trail of Tears and in the removal. That is an kind of the root of this show that Brenda and I have together, because Brenda's background is growing up in Oklahoma, and the Cherokee people are now three, but two major separate recognized tribes. Although we all started in North Carolina, we got fragmented. And so the Connecting Lines title is about connecting those lines again. And Brenda's over there on the floor. But I do want to thank her for very much for inviting me to share this space. Brenda's from Portland, and I'm from Atlanta, so I don't know if I would have gotten connected to the Portland Art Museum without Brenda's invitation. And I would like to thank the Portland Art Museum and Mike Morawski and John Richardson especially for all of the support that was part of my creative process. I had not actually planned to have a video, and I do now. I had planned to do that action within the gallery, but I didn't. I dreamed of a video, but I certainly didn't plan to produce it myself. And I couldn't have. We did that here with the museum staff, and it was a really huge gift. Another gift that was really huge is the award that I received from the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, which actually supported this particular work. So I'm very, very grateful to them. They are in Portland and Vancouver. You probably know about them. And support Native artists in all kind of ways, in very strong ways, and it's extremely important to have that support. So I think I will talk about the work now. If you have some questions after about the syllabary, I'll be happy to talk to you more about that. And I will say that Cherokee is an endangered language, and as many are extinct and many are endangered, and there's a big move to revitalize it. So that's the other reason that it was important to me and Brenda to have the syllabary in use and being displayed and being written out. My work is called Innate, which references matrilineal connections and lines. The work is about violence against women. And since 2006, I've been doing multimedia installations that dealt with used material volume as a device. I would find statistics, I would work with numbers, large numbers, and I felt as though creating material volume to present large numbers had more impact than just saying the number or writing out the number. And if you go on my website, which is luzenehill.com, I have some other work, my previous work, that uses material volume. I've done something with 24,480 rose petals, and then retracing the trace used quipu chords. And so my research last summer with the quipu led me to cochineal, and over in the alcove are cochineal bugs, and I was really planning to do more work on the quipu, and I discovered cochineal. And about the same time, I also discovered the earliest images of women in the Americas, which have been found on the coastal region of Ecuador. They're called Valdivia figures, and they are about this big, goddesses, about 3,500, 4,000 BC is the earliest ones. So I was looking for input from early Native culture, pre-contact, as early as I could find, to try to get to the essence of our culture. I feel, being Eastern Band Cherokee and being on the eastern side of the United States, our contact with the invaders was early, and it was a lot. And so I feel, I've researched our myths, and I feel as though they've been so corrupted and interpreted by English-speaking people that they don't really reflect what our real culture is. So that's why I got interested in pre-contact culture. I've done work about Aztec codices and Maya glyphs, and then the Inca quipu. And when I found cochineal and I found the goddesses, they came together. I'll tell you about cochineal because this was profound to me to discover. Cochineal was cultivated by indigenous people in Central and South America before contact for thousands of years, and it was used to color textiles and to paint on walls. It was primarily used for sacred ceremonies and rituals, and the color, of blood represented life and death to people in the America, and in a sacred way. when the Spanish came in the 16th century and discovered Coach Neil, they were astounded because in Europe at that time, red was produced using madder, M-A-D-D-E-R, a plant, and it wasn't the intensity that cochineal gives. It was, it's kind of muddy, dark red. So they really liked this color, and it was, as I said, cultivated. It grows on cactus, and they're very tiny little bugs. You can look at them in the carafes over there, but they're very small, and the color comes from carminic acid, which is a deterrent against predators. It is in the female bugs only. So my work since 2009 is about violence against women, and increasingly focused on violence against Native women. So when I read about the cochineal and the female bugs and deterrence against predators, and then the Spanish hoarded and plundered the cochineal and exported it back to Europe and got very wealthy because they had a monopoly on it. They didn't tell other people that were buying it what it came from, and they couldn't tell. There were not microscopes at that point. So no one knew if it was a plant or a seed or what it was. And it looks like a seed, really, because they're so tiny. But it was metaphoric for colonization overall in terms of plundering the people and the land and the resources. The Europeans used the cochineal to represent wealth, and because the Spanish made it expensive, and power. The cardinals' robes in the Vatican, cochineal. The British redcoats, cochineal. So that was their take on the color, and then indigenous people's take was that it was sacred and it was special for ceremonies. The process of coming to create installations is sort of an evolving process. Cherokee people have for centuries made capes that look a little like this, that are made out of feathers. And I was interested in that. I've thought about making one, but when I started thinking about this show with Brenda, I wanted to use the goddess figures, and I wanted to use the cochineal. So I came across another number that was very interesting to me, 6,956. This is the average number of Native American women who are assaulted in a year. Only 16% of sexual assaults are ever reported overall. It's the least reported violent crime. And I'm certain that for Native women, it's an even smaller percentage that's reported. So 6,956 is just a tiny representation of the actual count. Native women are almost 3 times as likely to be assaulted than other women in the United States. Yes, and 90% of the assaults are by non-native men. This is an anomaly within ethnic groups. In every other ethnic group or racial group, assaults are within the same group, white on white, black on black. But with Native women, it's non-Native men assaulting them, which is another reflection of colonization. And all of this was too intense for me not to work with. So I decided that I would make a cloak, and I got silk. Cochineal works better, is more intense with an animal fiber like silk or wool rather than linen or cotton. So I got silk, cut it in strips, and then went through a long process of figuring out my dye baths, which was trial and error and a lot of fun, but it took much longer than I anticipated. And I was astounded when I first started working with it, because when I did the first one and then I, let the fabric soak and pulled it out and was hanging it up to dry, it was breathtakingly wonderful. It was so intense, I understood why the Spanish fell in love with it. I don't understand why they were so selfish with it, but I did understand. I mean, it's the range of color. So if any of you work with yarns and things like that, and do dyeing of your own, then I would highly recommend using it, because it's wonderful. And depending upon the mordants you use, you can make it from almost purple and crimson to scarlet, just depending upon how much the intensity, the solutions, and all of that. And I just kind of threw things in. I don't really like to read directions, and I started out, measuring it and the water and all of this, and then it didn't seem to matter so much. But I loved working with it. So I cut the strips, I dyed it, and then I started cutting out goddess figures. I found the goddesses, and I printed out the pictures that I saw online. And so I had a silhouette, mostly of a head, shoulders, and then a torso, and then just two legs. So those were kind of my little template. And I cut out 6,956 little goddesses. And they represent survivors, and they are imbued with the cochineal to protect them. And then I clustered them in threes. I laid three on top of each other and then tacked them in the center. I clustered them in threes because Native women are 3 times more likely to be assaulted. And so that made, I think, 2,300 little feathery clusters. And then after I did all, cut them and then tacked them, I sewed them on a form, a cloak form, and surprisingly, they look like feathers, which is what I wanted to do to begin with. I mean, that was my inspiration, was the Cherokee feather capes. And I thought they might, but I wasn't sure, and then they just did. I am also interested in myths involving transformation. And so I've done some artist books illustrating language books for the Cherokee language program that use Cherokee Myths. And there's all of the ones that I've done deal with transformation and kind of shape-shifting. The one that I love is Spearfinger. And she shapeshifts. She's a little scary, but she's a very interesting character, and you can get information online about it. It's and I love her. I think she's not a monster. I think she's just kind of misunderstood. Yeah, but so I liked her, and I wanted. I was thinking about doing something with these garments, and so I decided to do an action, which is on the video. I was going to do it one time here in the gallery and then hang the pieces, and Mike suggested that, wouldn't you like to do a video? And so I'm really grateful for that. That's what we did, and then I'll explain the action, and that sort of pulls all of it together, I think. I started, and you can look at the video if you haven't seen it, then when I finish. But I started in that corner, kind of in the shadows, and covered with this cloak, so that it looked like just a mass of material, shapeless, amorphous, and then I began to move slightly and animate this material. I move out slowly. It becomes a thing. It becomes something else, and then when I get around here, I slowly emerge, and it's no longer an amorphous thing. It's a woman, not necessarily me, a woman covered with cochineal protection and the protection of 6,956 goddesses and 6,956 Native women united together. So my work is about pointing out these numbers and provoking a dialogue about this issue. But it's also about empowering Native women and empowering all women. And that's why my title is innate, which is a synonym for matrilines. I'm very interested in matrilineal culture and societies, which are predominant in early cultures all over the world. I'm advocating to get back there where women had a higher status as a way of preventing assaults. So getting back to my action, I come here, I walk out, and I emerge from the cloak, and then I'm about here, and I am a woman protected, and I'm a woman who's become empowered. The cloak rises up magically through theater and video magic, and I walk out. That's in place, and it's there with those numbers that are there for people to see and consider. I'm empowered, and I have on the inner cape, which is also dyed with cochineal, and begin to feel the power that I've gotten and that I have on me. And then I start moving back to this area where I emerged. But then this big white infinity, unknown, open to possibilities, is here. And then I turn I move towards it, and then I move into it and through it, because I know I can do it. I have the power, and I disappear because it's not about me. It's about women, and that empowerment and that protection remains in the gallery to be absorbed by anyone who comes in the gallery. So I think that's sort of the gist of it. Do you have any questions?
I love the color, and I thank you. Ski.
Thank you.
I have some questions.
Okay.
I love the idea of empowering people, generally speaking.
Yes.
And I think that having symbols helps lots of people. But in my work, I've found that education empowers people.
Yes.
And large numbers of people that to joining together that feel moved by the issues is a way to give you the power to bring about change. The things that you're talking about happen all over North America in Native communities. The tribes do not support the women. The white men on reserves, I forget, they call them reservations here. They do not make it easy for women to have any power, and white men are allowed on the reserves to be there. So if the tribes, I think at some point one needs to narrow it down to work where the people are in the tribe. There are many very well educated Native women, very many schools for Native people, at least in Canada, that I've noticed, and I'm not sure about here. But although the old ways are respected, when you're living in a modern age, you have to adapt and cope with what is happening. And that and education about what your options are, what the laws are, how to go about bringing evidence, and having the support of your tribal leaders is a very important thing. And so I applaud what you're doing, I really do, because Native women are being killed on the streets of Vancouver, BC, all across Canada.
Right.
And children too. I feel that empowerment is important for people that are being oppressed, whether they are Native,
Right.
LGBT, Jews, African Americans, whoever. And the road to empowerment, we talk about the red road, but the road to empowerment is through education, developing skills, and having symbols that show who you are. So I applaud you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ski. The issue of non-Native men on reservations and the jurisdictional issues in the United States. I'm not certain about Canada. The effect of colonization is so enormous that it would take weeks and weeks and weeks of discussion about what effect colonization has had on Native people for 500 years. But the actual jurisdiction for assault, I'll give you an example of that may be its current event in a way. The Dakota Access Pipeline. Pipelines are built by mostly men, and they are in camps near in the West, in the Midwest, near, and in Canada, near tribal land. And that, besides all of the environmental issues about the pipeline, Native people know that when a pipeline is nearby and those man camps are set up with men working together 12-hour days and isolated, the assaults increase. A white man can go on a reservation and commit a crime and leave, and the tribal police cannot go after him.
FBI.
Yeah, well, the FBI is busy. You know,
Lately.
I mean, yeah, but the FBI is not likely to go after a man for assaulting an Indian woman. And if that seems crazy to you, it is, but that's the fact. And so women, they know this, and the tribal police know it, and the men know it. There was an interesting, I could go on a long time and I won't, I'll let this go, but there was an interesting incident of a white man abducting a woman. Now, I don't know if she was Native or not, but he deliberately abducted her and took her to tribal land and assaulted her, knowing that he wouldn't be prosecuted. But he was, because it wasn't tribal land. He got his directions wrong. But people know this, and they use it.
But the tribes are very powerful on reservations and on reserves. So they have, what's the process to change that law and give authority to the tribal police?
Well, there was, Brenda, you may know about this, but there was recently some legislation that was not supported about giving tribal police more legal jurisdiction about various crimes that happen. It's very, very limited. And now domestic partners can be prosecuted, but this was like in the past year or so. But that's for, domestic partners on a reservation. But the tribe is limited about what it can prosecute in terms of the intensity of the crime, and also it's limited about the kind of punishment that it can bring. And it's not at all like comparable, but it's just it's a sad state, and it's changing slowly, but it's changing very slowly. It's changing a lot because young Native women who are attorneys are writing the Violence Against Women Act. Sarah Deer, I would recommend that you read her if you haven't. Sarah Deer, D-E-E-R, is an attorney. She's won a MacArthur Fellowship, and she advocates for to stop violence against women. She was instrumental in writing the Violence Against Women Act, and that was hard to get through the legislature in the United States. And Joe Biden was very supportive of that, but it was very hard. And a lot of the objections were about, we're giving the tribes too much power, because this is 500 years of don't give those people any power. And I'll talk about this for a long time, and I won't, because I feel strongly about this, and I feel strongly about the fact that most people don't know this. It's not in the press. No, not that many people know about the Dakota Access Pipeline, or they don't know the real facts. They know fake news, maybe, or nothing at all, because it wasn't covered very much. And it's just a continuing saga of Native people being a very tiny minority. We're about 1.7% of the population. So that puts us down in that box that says other. I mean, it's, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, and then all the rest of the people. And that affects what we can do in terms of the federal government, and in terms of society. My work is to speak out and make noise about this and to give people a voice. The other thing that's important to me in my work about violence against women is it may not be projecting all the way to Washington today or to the state legislature, but it's important to me that when a woman comes in this space and looks at the work and reads about it and knows what it means and what it's about, a woman who is a survivor, it affects her a great deal. That's why I keep doing it, because I was surprised the first time I made The Body and Blood, which was 2009. I was hesitant to work on this topic, but then when I did and I got the response from women about it, I was overwhelmed. And all women are not ready or ever want to talk about their own experience. It's really hard, and but when someone is saying something, then they're saying something, and I'm giving the voice to other survivors. So that's why I do it. Yes.
Where else have you shown, besides here in Portland, Oregon, and you're from Atlanta, so you had a show in Atlanta, and any other places in the country?
I'll have some work at the University of Missouri in August. And last year I had a large installation at the Idle Jorg Museum in Indianapolis. Yeah. And that was, the Idle Jorg had it up for almost a year. It was really wonderful experience for me to know that. The rose petals were at the University of North Carolina in Asheville. And then they've also shown in that area. I've had work, my drawings and some sculpture that have traveled around the country, traveled in Russia, Japan, and we hope to travel this. So yeah, but I'm happy to show if you know someplace that would like to host the work. I'm open to suggestions. So, yeah.
I just wanted to mention that wonderful book by Louise Erdrich, Roundhouse.
Yes.
Which is, right on topic.
Yeah. And she's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. But I guess I also just felt like I needed to say that while education obviously is important for women, that the onus, should not be on women. And
yes.
Educated women are assaulted, abused, whatever. And I think just, things like this that give people a sense of support and community is really the most healing thing.
Silence shrouds the experience of sexual assault. And a woman is often strangled to control her and silence her, and then afterwards, the silence is suffocating and enveloping to the survivor. her family or friends don't bring it up because they just aren't going to talk about something so personal. Women are generally reluctant to talk about it, but silence gives consent. And when society and men in fraternity houses, young men silently give consent to other young men or older men or whatever, or families know that this is going on, and that the silence is giving consent, and that's, yeah, it's not a woman issue. It's a power issue, and it's an anger. It's power and anger that sexual assault is, and it's not a woman issue, but women are taking it on, and I'm taking it on, but it requires everybody to speak up and to object and to say that no, this isn't okay. It isn't okay to grab somebody. No, it's not. It's not okay. And people have to speak up, and it'll stop. And women getting higher status will help that too. So, yeah.
I think of activism as, equal parts conversation and knowledge sharing, reflection, but also action. And I'm really curious about the action with your work, when you started integrating that in your practice, and what inspired that.
It was a gradual evolution for me to actually have this kind of action in my work, but I want to do more of it. When I made the rose petals, that involved pouring 720 rose petals over a basket every day for 34 days. And at that point, I was working on statistics about women in the United States. And so 720 was the number of reported per day. So that involved that, and I did some of that. I had volunteers to do some of the days. Retracing the trace was with the quipu cords, and I was covered with these cords on the floor, and then I got up and I left the imprint of my body on the floor, surrounded by these red quipu cords, and then it was a ritual of my taking them off the cord and off the floor and putting them on the wall. So that was kind of a ritual thing. But the Idle wanted to videotape that, and so that they could show the time lapse of the cords going onto the wall, gradually, and the imprint, the body imprint, slowly disappearing. So that kind of prompted me to want to do this work, and I feel as though getting in between the work, and it's great to be in between, to have Brenda's work over there, and for it all to be sort of speaking to each other. But I think the thing I like about installations is that it puts the viewer in the work. And then I have found out that from the Body and Blood and from the conversations of women, that my personally identifying with sexual assault allows other people to express and identify, maybe not even openly about their own experience, but they identify through me. And so I think it's important for me to be in the work too. So yeah, I was in the work and I love it. It was wonderful. So yeah, thank you.
I'm originally from the southwest deserts of California, and there's a cactus that is well known. It's a small paddle cactus that has kind of like a purple color on the outside of the paddle. And then after, it's very easy to grow. And after, if you just take off a piece and stick it in the ground, it'll grow. And when it reaches a certain maturity, it seems to develop kind of a white, spongy fungus around the edge that when you touch it, turns vermilion. I mean, it's the brightest, most startling color. And just word of mouth, I wondered what this was, and nobody really could tell me except that they believed that it was used by the tribes in the area for some ceremonial uses. And I don't know if you know of this particular dye from this cactus.
I would guess that is the cochineal and the prickly pear cactus. I need to sit down. The cochineal grows, it has as its host a prickly pear cactus. And when they're growing, the female comes to a cactus and then, has her babies, and then it just sort of grows. And that may very well be that, because the color. And that's probably the way that the early indigenous people figured out that, wow, that's a color I can use. I can figure out how to do this. And they actually, but I would be interested to know if that is the same.
Yeah, the color is much different. It has much more purple in it.
But that's pretty high up. But it's the range that I got when I was dyeing it goes from purple.
Does it?
Yeah, it really does. And it depends. You can add mordants, and it depends on the fabric. But it really goes from purple over to yeah. So I bet it is the same. But the early indigenous people in Central America and South America cultivated the cactus to get the bugs.
Right.
And they would, it was a lot in the mountains, and the cochineal now that I get comes from Peru. But it was, and so because of the weather, the indigenous people there would move the cactus if it was going to get too cold, down further, to a warmer part of the mountain or something, to protect the bugs, because it was completely a cultivated resource and ready-made for the Spanish to commodify and market. So, but yeah, I bet that has to be it.
Well, it must be. I'll have to do a little more research with people I know there in the desert.
Yeah, those cochineal are the ones that I use. So they've been extracted, but they look a little different. They look more gray before the color's extracted from them. When I get them from the company, they look a little different from that. They're more gray.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the process then of getting the color out of them? Do you grind the shell, or the insects are dead, I assume?
Yeah.
When they come, it's not an extraction that they extract. It's
correct.
in their wings or in their shell, or is there a little gland that it's in?
I think it's their little bodies. They're very tiny, and there are different ways. I did read some directions on some of this, but there are different ways. Some people, some things I read, you do grind them. And then put them in the water. I wanted to have mine after. I wanted the relic of it, and so you order them. They arrive from Peru, and you put them different amounts in water. Heat it up to a simmer. Simmer for about 5 minutes, and then I would let them sit in that bath for about a day. You can get about 3 extractions from one group. And then I would put the fabric in and leave it in for about another 24 hours.
Taking out the.
Yeah, yeah.
Strain the insect.
Yeah, strain them, and then do another dye bath, and then strain that, and then you have to sort of give it up because you're not going to get much. But it's inside their bodies. I couldn't see any wings, but that was until the microscope was invented, then people didn't know, and the Spanish did have the monopoly on it, and it was like the spice trade. It was very expensive. Yeah, but look it up because there are all kind of books. There's the art history of a color. The Metropolitan Museum has you can find that online. It's not a book, it's a very intense pamphlet. And then there's another book that's very interesting called A Red Like No Other. That's very informative. And then when it did get to Europe, artists like Titian used cochineal for some of their paintings, and other artists of that period used cochineal in their paint. So.
Luzene, one of the people I've been able to, I hesitate to say joy, to be fulfilled with this exhibit, mentioned that the cochineal were, of course, part of the display because for Cherokee, the remains are very important.
Yes.
Was that a knowledgeable response she made? Something about the remains being ceremonial, perhaps? Or?
That may be, I don't know exactly, but in general, everything is honored, and everything is used, and everything has value. And we were talking at our convening in the last couple of days about, and I sort of referenced it in the beginning about the fact that there are not words in indigenous languages, some of them anyway for sure, that are equivalent to dominant. Dominance doesn't enter into the whole sense of being. It's about balance, and that's why I'm so interested in matrilineal culture, because most native indigenous communities, early ones, everything was balanced. There was a duality about life. There was a duality between men and women. And there wasn't that dominance. And that's why I say in the beginning implies both what I seek, the genesis of indigenous culture in the Americas, but also what I reject, which is a patriarchal foundation that starts out with dominion over, that humans have dominion over the land and the animals, and we clearly don't, or we're finding out we don't. And Native people know this. And so, yeah, I think that probably just the remains and every bit of something is valuable.
Do you have any plans for showing in the Southwest?
I would love to. In fact, as I said, Brenda and I are looking for places for the show to go travel. I came to art late in my life. I haven't been making art all my life, and I exhibited for the first time when I was 50 at Indian Market. But being from Atlanta, that's a lot of shipping. So it's not you know, it's not, I've only done it once, but yeah, there's some really great venues. I'd love the Heard Museum or some places in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Yeah, I would love to do that. So we're looking everywhere. Anything else?
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.